study evolve and grow over the last couple of years. We've been measuring for the last 6 years and quantifying pharma's success. Ultimately, what we're looking for is awareness and intent and the ultimate prescription activity. We look at both prospects and patients and tie that into an ROI analysis in the end. We have the only pharma industry norm, and basically, as you can imagine, pharma is pretty diverse with the different conditions and categories. So it's taken some time to amass these studies. 62 overall, with 25 brands in therapeutic areas. So with that being said, I'm going to try to make the methodology go a little quicker than normal, because we have presented the methodology before. We look at awareness, favorability, preferences, intent, and conversion. We are looking at the point of exposure, both for online banner ads, for website visitation, and for search activity, and then tie that to the awareness metrics as well as the ROI metrics. Everything is measured against the control. So when we talk about lifts, which we'll talk to a lot, it's the lift, the point lift against that control. So we know the control is being driven by existing brand awareness. We also know that the control is being driven by offline activity. And we take that into account in our test. And what we're able to do is isolate the specific lift driven by the component or cell that we're measuring, whether that's ad exposure or search activity or site visitation. So with that being said, what we've seen in the last 3 years is that the health category is by far outpacing overall internet growth. 64% growth over the last 3 years in unique visitors as compared to 18%. So this should be no surprise to everyone here. This is why we're all here. The growth is there. And ultimately what we're finding is that the presence of pharma and healthcare are driving physician visits and scripts. People are getting educated in their own health management and understanding what their options are and taking that to the doctor. Basically pre-educating themselves for their discussions with their physicians, as well as educating themselves after. We do see activity come to the site or to brand sites as well as search activity as it pertains to post-prescription because they want to understand more about what they're going to be taking. So we're going to look at pharma sites, display advertising, and paid search. So first, let's look at pharma sites. Half of online Americans view health content online. That's 91 million. When we speak to health content, we're also including the WebMDs of the world. This is not just pharma sites, we'll get to that. 78% visit these health sites to learn about a condition. That's 651 million health-related searches, and spending about 35 minutes and almost five visits per month. So there's considerable activity. When you look specifically to pharma sites, we see that about half of those unique visitors visited pharma sites. So here you see 87% visit content sites, while 34% visit pharma sites. And what we've found in our studies is that people are visiting these sites. Basically, there's an education process. So as they're learning about their condition, they're going to content sites. As they become more engaged in that condition, become closer to therapy, they start going or receive a prescription or start discussing the treatment, they start going to these sites. But there are some who only go to the branded pharma sites. What's interesting is when you break down what sites they're going to, it really has less to do with incidence. Mental health and oncology being the two dominant content types or therapy types that are viewed online. Cold and flu, cardio, cholesterol, in theory should be much larger, but aren't. So it really depends on the condition. Not as much information to be had about cold and flu, although I would say this is even inflated because of the swine flu of last year. So just because it is a high incidence condition doesn't always mean that site visitation will be driven to that therapeutic area. So looking at the KPIs, we start to look at how pharma sites drive awareness. And we see that there's a 20 to 27 point lift in the awareness of prospects. So these are people who are not on therapy. When we look at prospects' favorability towards a brand, it's increased by 20 points. Now again, these are point lifts, so the control, and because there are so many studies included in here, we don't really speak to what the control level was. But ultimately, if the control was at, say, 10%, this would mean a 20-point lift would mean that there's a 30% in the test cell incidence. So you can see that it is a considerable lift. We look at favorability, and both for patients and prospects, and you see it's around 19-point lift. When you look at intent, and that's intent to discuss treatment, discuss the brand, and ask for the brand, you can see well above a 30-point lift for those who are exposed to a ePharma website. And ultimately, for patients, those who ask for a brand, it's in the same ballpark. Now, just the one thing I want to point out, with these numbers, we're going to use these in some examples towards the end of this presentation. So these point lifts do translate into ultimate prescriptions and sales. So while point lifts are a little harder to explain to management, we'll be able to turn them into actual prescriptions, which is much easier to quantify. So we start to look at scripts, and you'll see that there's an 11-point lift in site visitor